So firstly, maybe I would like to explain why have I chosen this topic. The modern Czech music theory developed after World War II, mostly between the years 1945 and 1968. And of course, the turbulent situation, the political situation has influenced music theory a lot. And I was thinking about finding some concrete example of this influence, and I came to an idea that early works by significant Czech music theorist Jaroslav Volek could represent this influence very well, and that it would be very interesting. His early work is based very strictly on the philosophy of dialectical materialism, on a Marxist philosophy, and is full of political references. So in my presentation, I will explain what the situation in music theory was in that period in the 50s. Introduce Jaroslav Volek, and then I will compare and analyze his two early books, speak about their political, philosophical, and music theoretical aspects, and maybe about the relations or interactions between these aspects. Czech music theory has undergone an important growth after World War II, and one of the reasons why this development was so significant was that the Department of Music Theory was established at the Academy of Performing Arts. However, the department was abolished just a few years later because of the decision of the Minister of Education, Zdeněk Nejedlý, who was a musicologist at the same time, and he was an extremely influential person. And he decided that the Department of Music Theory is too similar to the Department of Musicology at Charles University, and that has weakened the position of music theory, of course. Furthermore, as Czech theorist Karel Riesinger writes, the music theory was viewed with some suspicion because the main focus of music theory is the form or the structure of the music, which was something that was also associated to formalism, which was also very undesirable at the time. And this brings me to the idea that in this time, music theorists had to find a new concept of music theory, a concept which would be acceptable for the new regime. Czech music theorist Karel Janeček even writes that the music theory should serve to socialist realism. And I believe that also the books of Jaroslav Volek are an example, and very strong example, of how the music theory was adapted and maybe defended in the new political situation. Jaroslav Volek was a significant Czech music theorist, but also an aesthetician, a semiotician, which gave him a broader perspective on the problems of music theory. He studied at Charles University, and then, since he was born and raised in Slovakia, he studied also in Bratislava at Comenius, at the time Slovak University. Concerning Volek's relationship with the communist regime and with its official philosophy, it needs to be stressed enough how it has changed during his life. In his early career, as far as I'm concerned, he was probably really dedicated to these ideas. He lectured at the Department of Dialectical Materialism and so on. But later he has reconsidered this approach. We can barely find it in his later works. And also his relationship with the regime changed. He was expelled from the Communist Party, probably because he had considered the immigration in 1968. He spent a few months in Vienna after these events in August. He was deprived of his functions, and he could not teach the students at Charles University anymore, so he does not affect their attitude to the communist system. However, he could stay there as a research employee. Yeah, there's animation. The two books which I will talk about today are Teoretické základy harmonie z hlediska vědecké filozofie, Theoretical Foundations of Harmony from the Scientific Philosophy Point of View, and Novodobé harmonické systémy z hlediska vědecké filozofie, Modern Harmonic Systems from the Scientific Philosophy Point of View. The first was originally written as his dissertation in Bratislava, the second as habilitation at Charles University. The very important feature of the books is that Volek writes about the theoretical approaches and explanation of harmony, and he compares and criticizes this explanation, not the use of harmony in compositions. These publications are conceived as diptych, as Volek claimed, and he had worked on these books almost simultaneously. And I believe it is useful to compare these two books, and I have chosen several categories that could maybe help us to briefly familiarize with these books and their purpose. I won't read it all, just a few comments. Both of the books are based on the philosophy of dialectical materialism. Both of the books are focused on harmony, and in each of the books, Volek deals with other problems of music theoretical approaches to harmony. In the first one, he criticized the approaches based on mechanistic materialism. In the younger one, those based on the idealism. It needs to be said that Volek's style is very expressive, very offensive actually sometimes, especially in the first book, and he is very emotional about the rightness of dialectical materialism in music. I will show some examples later. At the same time, he is trying to explain what should music theory have to be in accordance to the official philosophy. And also both of the books have some kind of political aspect, but in the younger book we find considerably fewer direct references to politicians, which may have been associated with the demise of Stalin's cult of personality, which was in 1956, and the younger book was published in early 60s. Another slide, please. As I mentioned, I think the books could be viewed through three aspects: the political, philosophical, and music theoretical ones. In this little graph, I wanted to show the relations between these aspects. There is a clear connection between the political and philosophical aspect, of course, since the Marxist philosophy was the official teaching of communism, and this philosophy influences in some way also the music theoretical aspect of the book. It has an impact on how Volek explains his concepts. However, another very significant part of the political aspect of the book is the quoting of politicians, of Stalin, Lenin, and so on, and comments on the regime, which seem to be actually very redundant in terms of the content of the book. However, since Volek probably wanted to legitimize his concept and the music theory as such, and also he most likely supported the regime indeed, these references needed to be added. This is a brief dictionary of the three main philosophical terms which are maybe most frequent in Volek's texts. Those are dialectical materialism, mechanical materialism, and idealism. What is important for us is what influence on music the author attributed to this concept. According to Volek, the mechanistic approaches tend to see the musical structure as a summary of smaller components, while the idealistic ones, on the contrary, were finding something extra musical in the structure, some metaphors, energies, powers, and of course, sometimes Volek considered these approaches to be too spiritual, too religious, which, as we know, was undesirable in communism. On the other hand, the application of dialectical materialism on explanation of the music structure and the harmony would, according to Volek, ensure the respect to the unity of the form and content, which means no prevalence of form, as in formalistic tendencies. Also, it took in account the historical context. As we read in the previous slide, according to dialectical materialism, every matter is in constant change, in constant process. And that was something that made Volek think about the evolutionary aspect of the harmony, which is also associated with the claim that quantitative changes lead to qualitative ones. In harmony, Volek applies this to his concept of the fourth function, the mediant, explaining that the mediant started to be used very frequently in 19th century, and that it was so frequent that the mediant has changed its nature in music and became more important and became a function. Now we can speak more concretely about the impact of dialectical materialism on the music theoretical aspect of the publication. One of the very important features of Volek's approach is his attitude to interdisciplinary connections in the explanation of harmony, especially to interactions with acoustic and psychology. Volek says that the authors of mechanistic concepts were overrating the acoustic. In the idealistic ones, the psychology is overrated. There is also Volek's quote below. Quotes are always in italics. This is also associated with the claim that while the mechanistic explanations try to explain the matter through the metaphor of the mechanism constructed from small components, in this case the tones or the partial tones, the idealists try to find something extra musical, and they found it often in psychology, in perception, or in some kind of symbols, as we will see later. Yes, Volek wanted to introduce a new scientific approach to music theory, the one which would be in accordance to Marxist philosophy. Therefore, he needed to deny all other concepts, basically. Maybe that's why he wrote two publications dedicated to rebutting the other concepts. Volek emphasized the roles of aesthetics and music theory. For him, these were the only purely musical disciplines. And that was something that supported his dismissive attitude to psychology and acoustic, because he believed that if there are some aspects of these disciplines which are relevant in music, they are already included in music theory, or should be included in the right scientific music theory. Okay. So these are some concrete examples of the concept which Volek denied. In Theoretical Foundation of Harmony, Volek has marked some important concepts as unacceptable because of their supposedly mechanistic nature. What Volek criticizes the most is the exaggerated emphasis on the laws of acoustic, brought to music theory, for example, through Helmholtz or Stumpf. It is also related to the term Naturklang, natural chord, which is basically a chord derived from aliquots, from partial tones. And Volek just did not agree on how the Naturklang is used for the explanation of the chords, that it supports the idea of the dominance of major chord, for example. But also he criticized the concept of dualism because he found the concept of lower partial tone series as mechanistic, and also he denied Riemann's concept of function, marking his explanation of function as the relationship as static, as something which denies the dynamic nature of the functions. And finally, schematism. This is for Volek and an extra level of mechanistic approach when the authors of the concept describes the chords through their small parts, through the intervals, and not just like a whole, like unity. Then in modern harmonical systems, Volek deals with concepts which are considered as idealistic. According to Volek, the concept can be idealistic in two ways: psychological or symbolistic. Among the symbolistic ones, we can find concepts working with numbers, with symmetry, with golden ratio. He is very critical to Landweis' publication about golden ratio in Bartók's work, for example. And regarding the psychological ones, we can find, for example, Kurt's concept of symphonic wave or energies, powers in general, but also the application of phenomenology in music theory. Those were the concepts which Volek denied. Here we have the concepts that are developed by him and that were inspired by some aspects of dialectical materialism, or about Volek claimed they are inspired by this philosophy. The very important in Czech music theory is Volek's concept of Thor functions. I have already mentioned that he supported this theory by his evolutionary approach. The other important concept is responsible bond, which is more about music structure, and it refers to a musical aspect which is most important in the structure. And since these bonds are different in every period, the evolution, the constant process in music is ensured. As we mentioned, the political aspect of the book is something which is clearly influencing it, although some of its elements, especially the quotes of the politicians, are redundant in terms of the content of the book. I would divide the political aspect of the book into the 4 categories. Loyalty to regime, comments on changes in society, approving to Ždanov's thesis, and references on political leaders. While the first and second categories are clearly present in both of the books, the third and the fourth can be mostly found in theoretical foundations of harmony. In this book, we can even find an extra chapter called Historical Significance of Stalin's Papers on Marxism in Linguistic Questions of Musical Form and Music Theory. Also, Volek, for example, claims that Ždanov's thesis will not restrict music theory, but will build new challenges for music theoreticians. And I have to say that in Czechoslovak music theory, I haven't seen many music theoretical books which would be such significant in this political aspect and would be so clear, dedicated to it, actually. Another. This also relates to a language or style which Volek uses. And I will comment this just shortly so you can read the examples. Especially in the first book, Volek is pretty expressive when it comes to denying undesirable concepts, to capitalism, to formalism. In the second book, he is considerably more objective. And this may be caused by the year of publishing. In the 60s, the situation was different. And also, that's my opinion, it can be also connected with the language, because the first book is written in Slovak, the second one in Czech. And as a Slovak, I can say that Slovak texts can actually bear more emotional expressions than Czech ones. That's just my opinion. And here we go back to what I suggested at the beginning of my presentation, that this diptych of the books is profiled as some kind of defense of music theory. Of course, Volek was very ambitious, and primarily he probably wanted to make his concept relevant. But there are many hints showing us that he also thought about the reputation of music theory as the discipline. And we know that also other theorists were commenting this situation. What suggests us to think about this book in this way? Well, Volek based both of the books on the evaluation of various approaches and suggesting a correct one. Then he criticized very strictly the non-Marxist music theorists and is proving them wrong. And also he is denying the old approaches. And he claims that from 1950 there are new impulses entering to the until then stagnating, according to Volek, field of music theory. So therefore I would sense the influence of the regime not just in the choice of the philosophical starting point or in the quotes of politicians, but also in the fact that the need of the new music theory has emerged in this time. This is just a short summary. I won't read it. Maybe you can just go through it shortly, and that's all. And thank you for your attention.